So the normal answer is every Burgundy producer looks to Burgundy. We have to give it with the wine's times as well. This is something we learned as well. All sélection massale from Burgundy.
Nice big aroma complexity from the glass, but then you get this like super lovely, refreshing, acidic mineral characteristics on the palate, you told me.
Yes, exactly. So we're way behind our colleagues from the Kaiserstuhl, for example.
Klaus Rebholz.
Nice to meet you.
Here we are.
Thank you, thank you.
I only know you from the phone. Sometimes I know people like personally, even if they come to the Cool Climate Summit for the first time. But you just also like told me trade fairs and presenting yourself internationally has been so far not part of the estate.
Yes.
So we didn't have a chance to meet yet.
Not yet, yes, but I'm very happy we have it now.
I'm also very happy. And I mean, where are we? We are at the Bodensee. And
yes, we are at the Lake Constance, the western shores of Lake Constance, very close to Switzerland. So we're only a few kilometers away from Switzerland. And the vineyards are also very, very close to Switzerland. So we're in the southwestern tip of the Baden region, Lake Constance, and very close to, again, Switzerland is very, very nearby.
And I mean, this is of course something I'm personally like very passionate about. I mean, no secret about that this whole like region, Switzerland, and going over to Baden and Markgräflerland and the Bodensee region. I'm really excited about it. There's a reason that we have so many Swiss exhibitors. This is really because I'm personally really burning for Swiss wine and to promote it internationally. So it's actually kind of cool that we promote a little bit this like bigger region, and we are going to talk about your wine style also like a little bit later, because I think people could have, let's say, the mistaken assumption that we are it's the southernmost part in Germany and it should be fairly warm, but that's actually not true, right? Because you are first harvesting in 3 weeks' time, you told me.
Yes, exactly. So we're way behind our colleagues from the Kaiserstuhl, for example.
Or Pfalz.
Or Pfalz, for example, yes. And the climate is very different compared to what we see there. We have a lot more rain. This is one of the rainiest regions, wine growing regions in Germany, and also where we have the vineyards is one of the highest we can find in Germany, and also not just in Baden but also in entire Germany. So the combination of the two is really special, and it's unique in Baden because Baden it's one wine region, but if you go from the Markgräflerland, Kaiserstuhl, and then also Breisgau up to the north, it's very heterogeneous. So it doesn't have anything in common with what they're doing there, even though it's the same region. It's very different here.
It's really, really exciting, and I'm looking forward to having some of the wine in the glass. Also, like I see already the label 13% alcohol, so this also like speaks already like a language.
Yes,
that it's
yes,
like
of course.
The stylistic, the cool climate stylistic. Looking forward to it. But before we dive into that and the winery and so on, let's start with our first 4 questions that everybody gets. So first one for you, and you told me already you have to maybe play around with the answer because you're a very young estate. Yeah, your father just founded it like actually a couple of years ago, not so long, right?
Just over 2 decades ago.
Okay,
in terms of wineries around the world, this is a fresh-born baby. Almost,
fresh-born baby. And now, if you wouldn't be a winemaker today, or you wouldn't be in the estate today here, what would you do?
If I wouldn't be here, I would be doing what I'm actually doing at the moment, also as the other side of what I'm doing. I'm working in pasta. It's probably got to do with the fact that I've lived in Italy for a while. During my studies, I studied business, and during my education, I went to Italy 3 times. And I fell in love with it, and also that's why I chose to go over into that business as well. Compared to wine, we have something in common. We both sit at the table and share good food and wine. So it goes hand in hand, but it's both really at the moment. Yeah.
Beautiful. And so then looking back, your father started like something around 20 years ago together with your mother, totally like from the side, just like getting a winery, and you will talk about it like a little bit later, but then you join them here and help them as much as you can, so to say. If you look at your work together and maybe like the wine style that you are doing here, is there like any kind of inspiration that you can say, there I really draw like inspiration for our wine style form? Is there a specific person you can mention, or maybe like some experiences, winery visits and so on, where you say this really shaped our understanding of what we are doing?
So the normal answer is every Burgundy producer looks to Burgundy, and we do as well. We have tasted a lot of Burgundy wines and we love them as much as we can afford them. But I think the real love and also the real style change that we saw also from our estate started within the region in Baden. There's some colleagues that have inspired us that are well known, not just in Germany, but also outside of Germany. And I remember a specific moment of one wine that really was an eye-opener for us. The 2010 Hecklinger Schlossberg by Bernhard. One of a wine that I still have one bottle left, and I'll open it in a special moment again, because that wine really showed us, okay, what's possible in our region in Baden, even though they have a completely different circumstances as well. But the freshness and the spiciness really was very special. So I would say that one wine, of course, then from a top producer in our region of Baden, was an inspiration to try something similar also here. Yeah,
I find this really, really nice. It's something I hear very often when I talk to the, let's say, Baden producers today, the quality producers that focus on Burgundy varieties. Of course, on the one hand, you are oriented towards Burgundy, because that is where the Burgundy varieties come from, and somehow it inspires everybody. But then I also like always hear this reference to, yeah, let's say the grand old names of Baden Burgundy production, right? Be it Huber, be it Franz Keller, be it the Wasmers,
Peter Wagner,
well. Exactly. So there's like a really cool community and scene of like quality producers to draw inspiration from. It's beautiful. Third question for you. I have a feeling it will be a Burgundy variety. Let's see which one. You and your personality as a bottle of wine. What do we drink?
Maybe a Pinot Noir. So Pinot Noir, depending on how it is, of course, can be very reserved and closed in the beginning. But once you get to know it, it can be very charming and complex, and has a long finish as well. So maybe in the end, it would be a Pinot that really describes that. But it's definitely the most important grape variety in our estate, but also the way we taste wines around the world in our region. Pinots everywhere, and probably ours also represented in our personalities by now.
There is something about Pinot Noir, right, which we all, I always remember part of my sommelier education. Really good teacher I had there. She was like the head of a 2-star restaurant for 20 years, the head sommelier in Copenhagen. And she used to say we start drinking Pinot and we don't really understand it. And then we go all around the world and try everything else. And in the end, we all meet in Burgundy.
Come back. Yeah.
Something magical about this grape variety. Fourth question for the introduction. Nature. What does that mean for you and the work in the vineyard? What associations pop up in your head when you think about nature?
Nature for us, of course, is the base of what we're able to do. As I said before, my dad founded this company over 20 years ago, and he started to plant every vine that we still have in our estate himself, with our help, but everything started from there. So it's the soil, it's the climate, the conditions that we have to be able to have this estate now, or to have this production now. And at the same time, especially in the beginning, when you look up in the sky and you don't know what's going to happen, if it's going to rain, or in the earlier in the year, in spring or in late summer, if it's going to hail. There's also a risk and unpredictability as well. And you never stop learning as well, because every vintage is so different. Especially over the last 3 or 4 years, we saw a super rainy, super cold year, especially here in 2021. 3 years before 2018, it was super hot. It changes every year. You have to adapt, and it can be fun, it can be risky, but it's two things. It's the basis for what we're doing, what we're able to do, what we're able to have, and at the same time, it's the unpredictability that you never stop learning, and you can't rely on your last experiences over something new.
Given that you have a background in business administration, does that drive you crazy sometimes, that you cannot budget and plan accordingly?
It absolutely is, and you have to say goodbye to forecasting models very early on, because you don't know what it's going to be like. There are some things that are similar. Okay, when you see the blooming in June, okay, if nothing bad happens, we should get this quantity at the end of the harvest. But then again, until the last grape is picked in late October, we don't know how the year went. So yes, the forecasting model needs to be adjusted heavily if you're into wine. Yeah.
It reminds me of a conversation with a Polish winemaker who was was wondering about all his Polish colleagues being so surprised by the spring frosts in 2024, and he was like, "Guys, we are in Poland. When I made my business plan for the winery here in Poland, I assumed every 7th year like a total failure, like no income and no production at all. That is my economic business plan, right?"
Yes, it's better to include the full failure, of course, as well.
It's a full possibility. Beautiful. With those words, can you briefly introduce the estate Rebholz to us?
Yes.
At the Bodensee.
So Rebholz is what my father founded. My father started in 2002, and it was almost a coincidence. He found nearby in a village called Bohlingen and a location called the Galgenberg, an old volcanic vent. It's part of the Hegau volcanic vents in that region. That there was a vine planning plan. That means it's regulated where you can plant vines and where you can't. And he found there's a possibility to plant vines there. And he did with 0.3 hectares of Pinot Noir in 2002. That was the start of everything. Again, Pinot Noir was the beginning of everything. And then slowly added, year by year, added a little bit more vines, then Weißburgunder, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris also were added, and then lately Chardonnay. And we have now 8 hectares, and mainly Bohlingen on the Galgenberg, the volcanic soil, and in 2 other villages on the peninsula, Höri, which is very close to Switzerland as well. It was a bureaucratic nightmare in the beginning to convince also here the bureaucracies in Germany that, there were actually 24 hectares in the late 19th century still on this Galgenberg. But of course, due to economic and war factors and the phylloxera, then in the late 60s there was almost nothing left.
You just showed me the old map, right?
Yes.
That you're hanging in the estate, with the old
The map is from 1871, I think, and there were still around 20 hectares of vines left. So yes, it's a fresh start, but we look at it more like a revival. Recultivation of what was once this wine history at the Galgenberg area, this volcanic soil, and we just brought it back. And when I say we, mainly my father, because he started everything. And that was the beginning. Now we have again 8 hectares, focusing mainly on Pinot Noir, which is 60%, and then more recently, over the last 5 years, we started planting much more Chardonnay. So that's the second biggest grape variety now, and then followed by Weißburgunder, Grauburgunder, and also some classic Lake Constance Müller-Thurgau as well.
Oh, beautiful! Yeah, of course. Yeah. And maybe quickly to make it clear to people, I mean, you're called Rebholz, and there's a famous Rebholz in Pfalz. And I asked you also before, you are not in family at all, which is a coincidence because it's a really rare name even in Germany, right? And you don't know of any other winemakers called Rebholz.
Not that I know of. We know them, but we're not related. Yeah. We don't have any similar roots. Maybe centuries ago, but nothing we can trace anymore. So we're not related to any.
But it's kind of what I found so funny about the name is because the name is so wine related, right? Because how do we translate it to English? It's the wood of the wine, right? The Rebholz.
It's literally the vine. Yeah, exactly.
It's literally the wine.
The vine.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So somehow your father has like this wine DNA, maybe this wine DNA that like led him to.
Yes, we also say we made our last name our virtue and our profession. And that's what we usually say. But yes, of course, it fits a vineyard of Cal. But that's a coincidence. There's no actual tradition in this case. Yeah.
It's super beautiful. So super introduction. Thank you for that. And now I'm actually looking very much forward to taste something. So you brought some wine for us, right?
Yes.
We start with a white wine, I assume.
Yes, we will taste two wines, one Chardonnay and one Pinot Noir later. We start with the Chardonnay. This is the first Chardonnay we ever made, so this is also a fresh project for us. Okay. But given also that we planted close to 2 hectares of Chardonnay in the last years, all sélection massale from Burgundy. This is the first wine that we have from this. 2023 Chardonnay vom Vulkan, from the volcano. This is an Ortswein or a village wine. And here we after picking the grapes, we crush them a little bit with the feet. So they sit in their own mash and their own juice for a few hours without destemming them completely. And then we press them, whole cluster pressing, we don't destem them. And the juice, then during the pressing process, we let it oxidize. We want it to oxidize for a few hours. We wanted juice to really get rid of everything that in the later state we want to find anymore. So everything is oxidized already in the juice state. Then we go into the barrique after sedimentation of maybe 12 hours, 14 hours. And then it's spontaneously fermented in French oak, 30% new oak, and the rest is second, third, even fourth time usage. And then they stay in the barrel for 12 months. And we take it out before the next harvest arrives. and it gets another ripening period of around 5 to 6 months in the stainless steel tanks.
And you work spontaneously since day one? So your father already worked spontaneously? Or
not since day one. Also, I think that came later. In the beginning, we also worked with yeasts, and then later, maybe 5-6 years ago, the first experiments were done also with spontaneous fermentation. And now, basically, in the estate wine level, so the Gutswein, we still work with yeasts as well, depending on the wine, and everything that's Village and Lagenwein, Grand Cru wine, single vineyard wine, is completely fermented spontaneously, red and white the same.
Beautiful. Very interesting, because you said about the setting time that you have in the beginning, the letting the juice stand a little bit with the stems. I mean, the first thing that strikes me in the nose is really like some spiciness, some etchiness, right? Something like, don't want to call it unripe, but crispy. It adds some like nice complexity immediately to like fairly good food profile. I mean, the malolactic is coming out very nicely. Got clearly some oak touch, right? Which is suiting, in my personal opinion, like the style of Chardonnay. Then palate is very surprising, because you expect something. I mean, now I saw the alcohol before, so you're like a little bit, how you say, like you have an expectation, but the acidity is quite striking. Coming back to the whole like debate about Bodensee and cool climate and so on and so forth, right? I have something much more powerful in the nose than I actually have on the palate, which is a kind of very interesting surprise, because you get nice big aroma complexity from the glass, but then you get this like super lovely, refreshing, acidic, mineral characteristics on the palate that just makes you to want to have the next sip.
This is what we're actually trying to look for. We want to have the white wines, and this is partially true also for the Pinot later, the freshness, but the crispiness of the white one is very important to us. So the high acidity, of course, comes from picking the grapes a little bit earlier than we used to in the past. We don't look for the super yellow grapes anymore that are super ripe or overripe. We pick them a little bit earlier. That's one factor. And then, of course, the spontaneous fermentation. It doesn't add any fruit. It doesn't add anything that's, let's say, demasking the wine in a way. So, and then at the same time, we try to let the wine or the juice sit. This is true for all the white wines. Or during the maturity, we don't do much movement of the wines during the maturing process. Also, all that combined keeps that freshness. Yes. Then also the wood. You know, you would assume that in the wood the wines get more broad and more full body, but actually we experienced, if we keep it like this, also the whole cluster pressing is a very important factor. The wines stay lean. The wood actually keeps the freshness. It doesn't take it away for us. We experience that it keeps the freshness. And this is what we're looking for also in the whites,
So a super nice example actually for what we just said in the introduction. I mean, you are fairly like cool, let's not talk like a cool climate region, but you have some cool climate influences, right? This is also what we see with other colleagues in Baden. Baden is a very diverse like wine growing region, definitely, with like lots of like different like small microclimates. You have with the Bodensee, which is actually the largest lake in Germany, isn't?
Yeah.
Actually, you can nearly call it a sea, right? I mean, it's fairly big, right?
We call it a sea, actually.
You call it a sea, right? Yeah. I mean, people like in southern Germany, it's kind of funny. They don't go to the Baltics or the North Sea, right? They go to the Bodensee.
Hopefully, hopefully, yes. Of course, we share this border, this lake with 2 other countries. So we have Switzerland, as I said before, but on the other side, near Bregenz, at the other side of the lake, we also have Austria. So it's culturally, I think we're more close to Swiss and Austrian. This is sort of like the Lake Constance culture, Alemannisch. Also the dialect, as you've probably discovered, is very similar to what we see in Switzerland, even though it's part of Baden. But yes, as I said in the beginning, like of course Baden is this very warm region, and then also the slogan is, of course, touched or matured by the sun. And that's true, of course, for most of the regions, even Markgräflerland, also the Kaiserstuhl. But here in the Lake Constance, we have a special location because, especially here on the Galgenberg, where we are, it's called Gallows Hill, where people were executed in the Middle Ages, similar to the Henkenberg in the Kaiserstuhl. What's special is that it's not just the volcanic soil. We have the tuff also in the underground, but also it's close to 500 meters high. And that's really special because it's one of the, together with our neighbors and on the other volcanic mountain, the Hohentwiel, the highest vineyards in Germany. So that of course brings freshness and coolness as well. Plus the rain, we have about double the rain that they have at the Kaiserstuhl during the year. We just had 150 liters in the last 2 days.
Wow.
Of course, that's a special event, but those two things together, compared to, and also combined with the closeness to the lakes, we're still 100 meters at the Galgenberg above the Lake Constance sea level, and about 2 miles away, 2 kilometers away from Lake Constance. So it's really a cool climate, combined with also then the wind that always overflows the Galgenberg. It really keeps the cool climate for the grapes also late into harvest, because together with that wind that always touches or flows over the mountain, really dries the grapes and cools them down also during the night.
I mean, it's kind of interesting to hear, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, Baden, maybe as a wine-growing region, has maybe a little bit of a marketing problem, right? I mean, it is the third largest region in Germany, right?
I think
it's
so.
Weinhessen, Palatinate, Baden, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of acreage under wines. And then traditionally, Baden has been much dominated by the Genossenschaften, right? So by the big like wine cooperatives. And I think like many people still like understand Baden wine as something heavy, something ripe, something powerful. Yeah, these like very warm, very intense 14% alcohol wines. And this is of course like a big task for the quality winemakers and the young generation to change that. And then some of these like, let's say, especially VDP quality wineries, but also like the ones associated to them, they really are on the forefront of that internationally. Is that something that you as a small family winery, as a fairly new player, benefit from? Also do you feel like when you talk to people and you present your products that you swim a little bit on this wave that Huber, that Keller, that Wasmars, so to say, created?
I'm not sure if we swim on that wave. I wouldn't compare ourselves or put ourselves on the same level as they are, because they really are role models, and they have been driving this especially for Pinot Noir and also lately Chardonnay and also sparkling wine movement over the last 20 to 30 years. So they started what we have been doing for the last 4, 5, 6 years. They started this 30 years ago. So they're at the forefront of this movement. They are influencing us in our style, what's possible. Also in a warmer region like the Kaiserstuhl or the Breisgau where they are operating, that for sure. But again, I think it's tough to compare our location to the rest of Baden, because
they're unique. Yeah,
it's very unique. It's just the altitude alone gives us completely different conditions. So yes, it's part of the Baden region, but on the other hand, I think over the last years, maybe even in the last 10, 15 years, we've been benefiting from the climate change, from the temperature increase a little bit. We get the maturity that we were enviously looking for. We were looking for the Kaiserstuhl. We're comparing ourselves, and when we started, okay, but Oechsle and sugar content isn't everything now, and it's an advantage actually now, because we're not let's say over challenged by the climate change yet. We're actually benefiting still from it.
You're benefiting so much. Okay.
The answer is both. They are of course influencing us from the style, what they're doing. They always keep the wine super fresh and juicy, and we really like it. At the same time, we have our own conditions here, and we want to find our own style, or we have our own style that represents the conditions that we have here. So it's both really. Yeah.
So the Bodensee region, wine-growing region, is fairly unknown in Germany, right? I mean, how many hectares is it? 400?
I think close to 500.
Close to 500. Okay, and this is including the Württemberg part or excluding the Württemberg part?
I think, good question. I think it's excluding the Württemberg part. Yeah.
So it's tiny. Yeah. You are a tiny, small little region. I mean, still like bigger than Saxony. It's just joking, but how do you market it? I mean, who's buying the wine? Is it mostly going to gastronomy, to local gastronomy? Is it private customers coming here? What is your marketing strategy at the moment for selling the product?
I think it depends also where you go at the Lake Constance. As we say, we share this lake with 2 other countries and also 3 other wine regions. So we have, of course, Baden, then we have Württemberg, and then also the Bavarian part, at least officially. For example, the Bavarian Lake Constance, Bayerische Bodensee, I think they're doing an amazing job at marketing their side of the region. And I think that works really well in that case. For our side, since we're basically the only ones, we don't have much of a group that we can share this with, we want to really show our location individually, of course, because it's so unique, and it's also so different from what they're doing at the Kaiserstuhl, that I think there's no common Lake Constance marketing activity at the moment, because the locations within Lake Constance and also the regions and the cultures are so different still.
Yeah.
But I think there is a bit of a great example again with the Bavarian Lake Constance. They're doing a great job at showing their side of the region.
Wonderful. And you and your estate, how do you sell mostly at the moment? Is it private individuals, is it restaurants in the region?
We're still very, very small. So far we have been selling close to half directly to private customers. Then another maybe 30-35% to gastronomy. And then the rest goes into export or special stores.
So you are already like somewhere in some markets where you represented at the moment?
UK and Sweden so far, but that's definitely something we want to expand on and to show what we can do and what we produce outside of Germany as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I'm looking forward now, especially to the Spätburgunder. I think we should get something in the glass because I probably told you also, like when you talk for the first time, but in Denmark, for example, in Sweden and Norway, we feel that the what do you want to say? The market awareness for German Spätburgunder is just increasing. So like more and more importers, distributors, they are asking like regularly. I also like get like every second week I get an email from somebody. Do you know any like German producers with good Spätburgunder? Because I think what we produce by now, when it comes to Pinot Noir, is really excellent. I mean, Germany does not have to like stand back at all anymore behind the large like Pinot Noir producers. We are definitely playing the game at the highest level at the moment, right?
I think it has, again, to do with what we discussed before. There have been some front runners who started this movement over 30 years ago, and they are still today probably the absolute experts and pioneers in Pinot Noir, but they also pull other smaller producers, they inspire them, the knowledge is shared among them, and I think those two things combined is really driving the Pinot Noir knowledge in Germany, and hopefully also us with this wine.
So I want to say I definitely have something in the nose that tells me there was also like a certain percentage of whole cluster going on.
Yes,
30% or something like this.
Yeah. I think it's even higher.
Even higher, okay.
20-40%.
Yeah.
This is our so-called flagship Pinot Noir from the 2023 Galgenberg Pinot Noir. This so far is only German clones. Where we go into the vineyard later, I'll show you that what we planted over the last 3 or 4 years is all sélection massale clones from Burgundy. Hopefully we'll be able to include them this year or next year in also this wine. We picked the grapes and we destemmed them partially, of course. We saw here, you also smelt it on the nose. We used, depending on the vintage, 20-50% of whole cluster in the fermentation. Before that, we do a 5 to 7 days cold maturation before we let the mash start the fermentation spontaneously. And then this is something that also we adjusted over the last years as well in the style. We do much less pigeage and much more remontage, so the juice is more overflowed over the mash, and therefore we get a much juicier, much lighter extraction, much juicier style. The cherry is something we always look for in a Pinot Noir, but the spiciness is very important to us as well. And this is the difficult thing about the Pinot Noir. You want the density, you want the full body, but at the same time it always needs to stay elegant. A fresh acidity that invites you to have the next glass, the next taste. Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, honestly speaking, maybe also like a little bit challenging sometimes of the German clones, right? I mean, now your father probably, when he planted them, I guess, right? I mean, it seemed probably like best practice and easiest practice at the time, especially when you start something and you don't have the network and you don't have all the connections to get like the best wine materials. But you feel in the nose that it's a German clone, right? Because what you just said, the juiciness, it is like for me, it's always like when we compare German Spätburgunder clones versus the, for example, classic 777 Dijon clones or something, or sélection massale from Burgundy, as you say, it is juicier, it is fruitier. It is a little bit more floral, has a little bit more like this florality in it, which is not bad. I mean, but it's definitely a different style than the totally classic Burgundy one. Yeah. And I think this is very important to underline. Even if you now go all in sélection massale from Burgundy, like maybe some of the larger producers also from Baden do. I always say opening a Franz Keller and expecting Burgundy in the glass is the wrong assumption. It will never be Burgundy in the glass. You know, it will always be like Baden or the Burgundy-inspired wine from a top producer from Baden. And we sometimes have to, I think, get rid of this like idea that Baden is a new Burgundy. Baden, and especially the sub-regions, have their very own style, which is very beautiful, very elegant, but it's still our own style and terroir that we bring in the glass.
I think that's the end goal, of course. I think for Riesling in Germany, you can say, of course, this is Pfalz, this is Palatine, this is even Baden, this is Rheingau. And there, the self-confidence, then of course, the identity is already there and has been for decades. For Pinot Noir, as because this, let's say, movement has been started 20, 30 years ago, of course, every producer is still finding their style. But also, I think at the moment, you can't really say this is German Pinot Noir because some producers produce more style that's similar to Burgundy, some really stay with the old style. So I think this is still an ongoing process where we say this is German Pinot Noir, but I agree with you. First of all, we're not able to copy a Burgundy, but also we shouldn't. Every producer in every region should find their own style that represents that region and that producer. This will go on for another, I don't know how many decades, especially for us, since we only started a few years ago with really finding our own style. But for us, it was especially important to keep the freshness in the Pinot Noir. We started out with trying to make it super full-bodied, maybe make the most of the ripeness of the grapes, let them hang on the vines more than maybe they should have. So we adjusted two things mainly: is the processing of the grapes, so the more overflowing of the juice, and at the same time picking the grapes a little bit earlier than we did in the past, to again have this freshness in the style. But I agree with you, it's still a German Pinot Noir, and it's supposed to be.
But what I really like about it is actually the aftertaste now, like listening to you and having this like unfolding on the palate here, because it's salty, it's a little bit licorice, it's like really nice and refreshing in it, and the acidity is playing out nicely, the fruit is coming out nicely, again the cranberry, this bit of sour strawberries there. Super beautiful. It's just like maybe 10 years too young, in my opinion, right? Yeah. And this is what also with the Chardonnay. I mean, actually, this maybe for me is the biggest surprise. I mean, being fairly new estate, and you talked a lot about your philosophy, but it's also like one of these signs. We have to give the wines time.
We have to give it the wines time as well. This is something we learned as well since we adapted the style when we first tried it. And of course, in the beginning, it can be a little bit. When you try these wines in their youth, they can be a bit edgy as well. If you come back a year or two later and try them again, actually you discover, okay, this really works. This matures very nicely. It keeps the freshness, but it matures. Again, this takes time to really learn because the mistakes you discovered 5 years later, by that time 5 vintages have gone by again. But yeah, I agree. It's completely young, but hopefully has a future to age for another 10, maybe 15 years, maybe 20 years. Let's see.
So talking about the future, I mean, we see you in January in Copenhagen, the Cool Climate Wine Summit, among many other talented colleagues from Baden, also from the Bodensee actually. We have a couple of guys there. And your Swiss friends, you already told me that the Adangs are somebody you really look up to and you know well. So they're also coming again in the Swiss corner. But aside from that, what happens next January, 5 years from now, where do you see yourself in the estate?
Hopefully the vineyards that I was describing before, that we planted over the last 2 or 3 years, have the maturity and have the balance to really show what they can do. So we can, what you described before, we have the German clones and we have the Burgundy clones, to really have both in our portfolio and really pick for us, okay, which grapes go into this Grand Cru style for this wine. So seeing the vineyards develop and really get mature and more balanced over time. And also for us, hopefully in 5 years' time, we have learned a lot more how to deal with all the vineyards, how to deal with all the harvest variances that we see. And we find new clients and customers all around the world, not just in Germany and our neighboring countries, but we want to really see our wines on a table everywhere in the world, and everywhere in Europe and everywhere in the world. That would be a dream that we're definitely working on. Yeah, for
I
sure.
love it. I love it. There is a vision and a mission statement I can see.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big fan of it. So let's cheers on those ambitions, and
Cheers.
see you in Copenhagen.